May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So several years ago, while taking a leave from formation with the Franciscan Friars in New York City, I lived in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom for a couple years. The Northeast Kingdom is a beautiful rural agricultural area populated by generations of French Canadians, whose families were principally involved in farming. As farmers, they were in tune with the land, with their crops and their herds. And they knew that I was a flatlander who wasn't a native to the Vermont mountainous landscape. The farmers were often able to predict the weather better than the local meteorologist. They didn't use a radar map, and they didn't check an app. They would just step outside, look at the clouds, smell the air, and they knew exactly what the weather was going to be. They knew how to read the weather with tremendous accuracy. Jesus talks about this kind of skill in our gospel today. You know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky, he says. But why do you not know how to interpret the present time? In other words, you can read the clouds, but you're missing what God is doing right in front of you. You can sense when it's going to rain, but you can't recognize a moral storm when it's on the horizon. You can tell when it's going to be sunny and dry out, but you can't identify the movement of God in your midst. And right before that, Jesus has another surprising line. He says, I came to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. Fires and signs, refining and awareness, disruption and discernment. Jesus puts those together. And I think they belong together for us, too. Let's be honest. The clouds in our national sky right now are dark and very heavy. Political trials and allegations, accusations of election interference, deep polarization that slices through families, workplaces, and even churches. Institutions that once felt solid are showing cracks. And a flood of misinformation is making it harder and harder to know what's true. Over the last several years, especially in the wake of the Trump presidency and the political movements around him, we've watched a shift in how truth is treated in public life. We've seen the power of words to inflame, divide, and sometimes even to incite violence. We've seen the norms that hold democracy together tested, and in some cases broken. These are not just political events. They are moral and spiritual signs. They tell us something about the state of our collective soul. And Jesus' questions echoes in the air. Can you read the signs of the times? Do you see what they mean? In our first reading, Isaiah tells a story that begins as a love song. God plants a vineyard on a fertile hillside, and it should be the pride of the countryside. But when the harvest comes, the grapes are sour and wild. The vineyard has failed. And Isaiah explains that the vineyard is God's people. God looked for sweet fruit, justice, and righteousness. But instead, God found bloodshed and cries of distress. The people should have seen the signs. They should have recognized that injustice was growing like weeds in the vineyard. but they didn't want to look too closely. They wanted to ignore what was right in front of them. It's not hard to see the parallel with today in this reading. America is a vineyard planted in rich soil with freedoms, resources, and institutions that are meant to produce justice and meant to be flourishing. But when truth is traded for political gain, when leaders encourage distrust in fair elections, when entire groups are targeted as threats simply for being who they are, just for existing, that is not the fruit that God intends. Those are rotten grapes in the vineyard, and God notices. In our second reading, the poem, Caged Bird, one bird flies free, claiming the sky, dipping into the streams, naming the wind as its own. But the caged bird's wings are clipped. Her feet are tied, and she paces the bars of her narrow cage. And yet, she sings. We are told that she sings with the fearful thrill of things unknown, but longed for still. Her song is a sign. Her song is the sign of hope that refuses to die. And it's also the sound of protest, of a life made for freedom but denied it. We can still hear the caged bird song today. In the voices of immigrants who came here for safety, who are now told that they are a threat, and who are arrested and deported. In the voices of public servants threatened or fired for upholding the law, who are the ones whose backs hold up the daily weight of democracy. In the voices of our transgender youth and LGBTQ neighbors who are targeted by fear-based politics for simply wanting to be who they are. Their song is telling us something. The question is, do we hear it? Or do we treat it simply as background noise? Jesus says he came to bring fire to the earth. This is not fire of mindless destruction. It's the refining fire, the kind that burns away what is false, purifies what is good, and frees what is cracked. This reminds me of one of my favorite stories of the Desert Fathers that you too might recall. One of the early Desert Fathers, Abba La, once came to Abba Joseph and said, "Abba, as far as I can, I say my little office. I fast a little. I pray and I meditate. I live in peace. And as far as I can, I purify my thoughts. What else can I do?" The elder stood up, stretched his hands towards heaven, and his fingers became like 10 lamps of fire. And he said to him, "If you will, you can become all flame." That's the fire Jesus is talking about. The fire of God's Spirit filling a person so completely that their life radiates truth and love and burns away every chain that binds them. But here's the thing about fire. It's disruptive. It doesn't leave things as they were. When the fire of truth comes, it exposes lies. When the fire of justice comes, it burns down cages. We know that disruption is often a sign of God's presence, of God working in our midst. Disruption is also often a sign of transformation, a sign of necessary growth. It takes us out of our comfort zone and into a world of possibility, into a world being transformed. That's why Jesus says that his mission will cause division, not because he enjoys conflict, but because some cling to the cage while others long for freedom. And when the cage begins to shake, sides are chosen very quickly. So what does it mean for us to read the signs and join in the fire's work? Well, I think it starts with ourselves. We can't just point to the cages out there without letting the Spirit's fire refine us in here. That means burning away our apathy, our blind loyalty, our selective compassion, the ways we stay silent because speaking out would cost us something. Then it moves outward. Reading the signs means refusing to normalize deception or cruelty, no matter what side of the aisle it comes from. It means listening for the caged bird's song, then acting to help open the cage. And yes, it will cost something. Speaking truth in a polarized time can lose you friends. Taking a stand can get you labeled as too political, even when what you're doing is deeply biblical. But ignoring the sign doesn't protect the vineyard. Instead, it lets it rot from the inside. My friends, the signs in front of us are clear. In Scripture, God calls for justice and righteousness over and over again. In our nation, where truth is disputed and the vulnerable and marginalized people are scapegoated. In the restless songs of those who are not yet free, those who long to simply be themselves, to be who God has called them to be. The question is not whether the fire is coming. It's already here. It's right in front of us and right around us. The question is whether we will let it purify and transform us, whether we will let it open the cages around us, and whether we will let it produce the fruit God intended when he planted this vineyard. The caged bird is singing. The clouds are gathering. The fire is burning. Do we have eyes to see, ears to hear, and courage to act? Are we willing to become all flame